Kia ora, I'm Katrina McLennan. Welcome to WomanPower, a new TV series that looks at how to get action to improve the position of women in New Zealand. We'll talk about the gender pay gap and how women's wages can be lifted. We'll discuss being a feminist mum to both girls and boys. We'll also look at reforming rape laws to give women justice in court and actions to reduce our horrendous toll of domestic violence. What do young women think needs to be done to give them equality? We'll talk to some students about feminism and young women. And why is women's sport underfunded and almost completely ignored by the media? One of our star sportswomen will give us her ideas. 2013 is 120 years since New Zealand women succeeded in the fight for the right to vote. The Equal Pay Act was passed in 1972. So why are women in Aotearoa still so far behind? We're paid 9 to 12% less than men and make up only a third of MPs. Women in Aotearoa are subjected to horrific domestic violence, and that's continuing year in and year out. Although women have been the majority of law graduates for years, there are still few female partners in law firms, and only 11% of company board members are women. 2013 is time for a Women's Action Agenda Aotearoa to take steps towards full, actual equality for women in this country. And in 2014, we can lobby politicians to take real action on behalf of women. And if they don't, we won't vote for them. Now, to talk more about action on behalf of women, let's welcome my two guests, feminists Tania Pūwhare and Sabrina Mook. Kia ora, Sabrina, welcome to the program.
Hello.
Kia ora, Tania, welcome to the program.
Tēnā koe, Katrina. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe. Kia koe hoki, Sabrina?
2013 is the 120th anniversary of New Zealand women winning the vote, and it's also more than 40 years since the Equal Pay Act. But New Zealand women don't actually have equality yet, do we?
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I think, 120 years of suffrage, what a wonderful milestone to be celebrating. Also the Equal Pay Act. But you're very right. There is an ongoing issue of gender inequality in New Zealand and of course around the world as well, so we're not unique in that perspective. But I think it's important that we're never complacent. Women fought hard to have the vote, and it's perhaps something that's not in our collective public imagination, what it was like to not vote. What a fantastic thing to be celebrating, but still a long, long way to go.
What are some specific areas that you think New Zealand women are not equal in yet?
I think most things. Economic justice, equality, not in du jour, not just the law, but also in reality as well. So we may have laws around equal pay, but we know that the implementation is falling short. So we've got, kind of work to do at that political and legislative level, as well as what it means in reality for women. So I think it's all areas. I think we're still a highly gender stratified society where women provide most of the caring, whether it's for children or whether it's for older people. So in all realms, we're doing better in education, but that's not reflected in our pay. So, and of course New Zealand has really horrific prevalence of violence against women, and that's something that we can never ever be complacent about and think that we've done that, or we've made progress in that area. We haven't. We need to keep going.
Yes. Do you think progress for New Zealand women has stalled, or do you think perhaps it's even actually going backwards?
I think in some areas it actually is, and even where it's not, it has definitely stalled. We are seeing some quite conservative or regressive policies affecting women in New Zealand. That's actually something that the UN Council responsible for women has identified as a concern in relation to New Zealand, because New Zealand as a country has signed up to certain obligations to protect and respect women's rights and well-being, and that's something we are falling a little bit short on.
And specifically, which areas are of concern to you?
I think I agree with the points that Tanya's raised. I would also say the economic justice, for example, we're seeing some very serious funding cuts and cost-saving measures. Family court is a good example, and that will have a direct impact on women and their lives. There is constant, either threatened or real, funding cuts to sexual abuse support services, which is frankly unacceptable. It's one of the most important things that we can offer as a society.
I think what we actually need is that women across New Zealand, we need to get together and we need to have a women's action agenda, Aotearoa, to try and advance things. And I thought, you know, if we started developing now, it would be particularly timely because next year is election year. So do you think we could do something like that?
Absolutely, why not? I mean, you know, thinking back to the suffragettes, they would have been derided in their time as, you know, kind of being beyond the pale. Why on earth, you know, are you kind of doing this? So I think in that spirit, we need to keep going and also always more effective as a collective in doing things in a collective way. And there is so much to tackle, and it would be great to get some political commitment and through some grassroots activism. So, you know, we're getting both.
So what issues would you like to see tackled most?
I think for me it would be issues around economic justice. I think some of the social policy that has significant economic implications is doing massive damage to women and children. And also the ongoing issue of violence against women. It's just an intolerable situation. But coming back to the economic issue, you know, New Zealand used to be one of the most equal countries in the world. We are now one of the most unequal, and we can see that burden is being borne by women and their children. So really significant and serious issues.
And what issues would you like to see on a women's action agenda, Aotearoa?
In addition to those already raised, I think there is a lot of scope to cover issues around reproductive rights and reproductive justice. Our abortion laws are still under the Crimes Act, unless you can come under one of 4 certain exceptions. That is not something that's really in line with how New Zealand likes to hold itself out to the rest of the world as a very forward-thinking, progressive country. Then on another level, you've got, and you were talking about women and their families, paid parental leave. Again, sadly, that is an area where New Zealand is lagging behind. The only OECD country that offers less in terms of government paid parental leave than New Zealand is the United States. So not really a high comparison to hold ourselves to. It's also an area where working women would find a lot of support rather than having to give a small baby back to a caregiver very soon after they've given birth in order to keep supporting their family. There would just be that increased support. And if that's really what the government wants to do, as they say, support working women, that would be a good step in that direction.
You've lived and worked in London, Tanya. Did you get ideas from there of how women can work at the grassroots, how women around New Zealand can come together to be more powerful?
Absolutely. I think there's been a real resurgence around women's rights activism and feminism in the UK, say perhaps over the last 5 years, and some really, really interesting, effective grassroots action taking place. So very social media based as well. But also making sure that there are opportunities for women to come together. So Million Women Rise is an example of, you know, kind of resurrecting women's activism through protest. And then we have some very sophisticated campaigns against, you know, massive industries like the media and manufacturing and other, you know, David and Goliath type situations where women have been really, really effective because they've just been absolutely spot on with their tactic.
Can you
and
give
really
us
imaginative.
Can you give us a specific example of that?
Yeah, so in the UK they have tabloids called Red Tops. A really famous one is, of course, page 3 of The Sun. There are also what are called lads mags, FHM, Nuts, etc. So a really effective campaign has taken place where women campaigners have now got really large supermarkets, the Cooperative is one of them, to insist that these magazines are out of children's line of sight and are in modesty bags. So a really effective campaign. They've played on the issue of the, kind of consumer, being a consumer, and taken their concerns to big supermarkets, and they're listening. So, and also the campaign around gendering toys. And what I really like about, which has been incredibly successful, and let toys be toys. Toys can be for girls and for boys. Why, having sections of frilly pink things for girls and more active toys for boys. So
guns and stuff.
Exactly, and they've been hugely successful. And what I really like is it's those everyday sexist stereotypes that are so inculcated in our lives. They are now the norm, and women have been incredibly successful in getting those things changed.
And what would you like to see New Zealand women joining together to do, and how do you think, is social media the best way to do it?
I think social media would be very effective in this forum because it's a way for people to connect and contribute their ideas quite easily, and it is also good for people who maybe can't get out easily, can't get to meetings, but have something that they want to say or issues that they want to identify, and I'd really like it to be a platform where we can hear from women across the board about what kinds of issues affect them or what they're concerned about. Something like the magazines is an excellent example, and has obviously had a lot of traction in the UK, and there'd be lots of other examples here as well. I think part of the issue with, as you term it, everyday sexism, which it very much is that issues affecting women in New Zealand are often so easily dismissed or can be seen as quite invisible. You have the vote, you can go to work, what more do you want? But I think now that we're speaking about this, and once we start to form an agenda, we can see there's actually a lot more than that to be tackled. So.
Thanks a lot, Sabrina. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now it's time for our regular weekly feature, WomanPower Fails and Wins. This week's fail goes to Police Central District Commander Superintendent Russell Gibson. He wrote a letter saying that a 10-year-old rape survivor was a willing participant in her own sexual abuse. He sent a letter to the convicted rapist's wife saying, quote, "There is evidence contained within the file which clearly demonstrates that the young girl was a willing party to these instances," close quotes. The rapist was convicted of sexual violation by rape and sentenced to 10 years in jail. And this week's win goes to the Football Ferns, the first New Zealand football team, male or female, ever to beat Brazil. Just a pity that such a historic event was hardly covered by the media. Women feature far less than men in the media and in political debate. Only about 1/3 of media appearances are women, 2/3 are men. But for Māori and other non-Pākehā women, the statistics are far worse. They're almost invisible in the mainstream media. To talk more about why this is and what can be done about it, I'm joined by Mariama Davidson. Kia ora, Mariama, welcome to the program.
Kia ora. Kia ora, ko Mariama Davidson ahau. He mokopuna hau no ngā iwi o Ngāpuhi, Ngāti Parau te rarawa hoki. E noho ana au ki Tāmaki Makaurau, mātou ko taku tāne, meo māua tamariki. E kōrero ana ahau I te taha o te whānau, ngā māma, ngā wahine, ara ko tērā taku tino kai. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Why are there so few Māori women in the media and in politics?
Firstly, I stand for mana whānau, and so that means I uphold the dignity of our men, of our children, of our women, and of all the parts that make up our whānau. So nothing I say wishes to deny or denigrate the work of my Māori brothers, but essentially we are lacking Māori women's voices because this is a patriarchal world that we live in, and it's unfortunately that there still isn't that broad acceptance of this. But what that means is we are still upholding the majority of the work for raising our families and nurturing our communities. And at the end of the day, there's not a lot of energy left over for the male testosterone world of politics and media. But on the other side, we are also having to struggle through the oppressions of patriarchy, and as women of colour, we have to struggle through a number of oppressions to even get to the first line. So those are some of the reasons why there is a lack of Māori women's voices at the moment.
And this is quite different because traditionally Māori women did have a powerful role to do with your female atua, deities, your unique relationship with the land.
Absolutely. Since before the creation of the earth, our whakapapa, our histories have included strong and influential female atua, female deities, who were the foundation of our status as Māori women in our traditional societies. I often talk about one of our first atua and primal parent of Papatūānuku, and so it's very easy for me to align with her as a creator, and like her, we are creators, women. We are water carriers and we are protectors of whakapapa, of genealogy. So those are the female, an example of the female atua who used to guide our life but who have been suppressed through colonialism and patriarchy.
And what's the impact both for Māori women and for the broader community of that suppression and exclusion?
The lack of our voices at all levels has resulted in the crack policies coming through that we are seeing today. So, for example, the welfare reforms, the neoliberal reforms since the 80s actually, have not supported the strength of whānau and have denigrated whānau even worse. The attack laws on the environment at the moment are another example of the sorts of policies that are sneaking through Parliament. Those policies are myopic and they do not support the strength of women, and so we actually see the downfall of humans and of communities because of it.
And what suggestions have you got for changing this and trying to ensure that Māori women's voices are heard?
It is all of our responsibility to continue to dismantle the colonialism and the patriarchy that we are all living in, and that is because it benefits no one. Patriarchy is not good for men, it is not good for women, it is not good for children. So we have to continue calling that to account. But also I'm really impressed by the number of Māori women who have put their hand up this year for local elections around the country, and that to me seems like an astounding leap in numbers. So I look forward to more of us finding out who they are and supporting them. And then, for any woman who feel that they can step up and have a voice at all levels, I think we all must continue to do that as well.
Tell us about the Idle No More movement.
So as I refer to Papatūānuku as being a guiding foundation for me, which is about protecting not just the environment but also people and our relationship to each other, but also to rocks and rivers and trees and mountains. The Idle No More movement is an Indigenous rights movement that wants to put the environment back at the front, wants to put harmonious relationships among us back at the forefront, and link the work that Indigenous people have been doing around the world because the earth is calling for a better way, and Indigenous people are happy and need to step up and lead that in collaboration with other communities and other people who care for their planet as well.
You stood for Parliament earlier this year. Was that partly to ensure that more Māori women's voices are heard?
Yeah, it was a direct result of Me Tiria Tūrei listening to me hankering to have a voice in any which thing for the past few years, for quite some time, and so she saw a unique opportunity to give me a platform to speak on the very issues that I am passionate about. And after some toing and froing, I too saw that opportunity and also figured that, you know, not only do I fight for certain kaupapa, but I fight for a woman's voice to be heard. So here was something being given to me, which I proudly and gladly took up in the end.
And you were still hoping to go to Parliament next year, aren't you?
Absolutely. I have said publicly that I will work to gain a place on the list, and I will also be standing for the general elections in 2014 as well.
Thanks very much, Mariama.
Kia ora.
Now it's time for News of the Week. Pakistani teenager Malala Yousafzai was the victim of an assassination attempt by the Taliban because of her advocacy of education for girls. Now she's being honoured by Harvard University as its Humanitarian of the Year. Malala says that she hopes to become a politician so she can have influence on a large scale. 16-year-old New Zealand singing sensation Lorde is criticising the submissive vocals in some other young female singers' songs. Lorde says she loves pop music, but she's a feminist, and the misogynistic words in some pop songs are hard to stomach. Lorde singled out songs by Selena Gomez and Lana Del Rey for criticism. She spoke about her feminism in an interview with Kim Hill and in other media interviews. Meanwhile, United Kingdom Prime Minister David Cameron has just given an interview in which he proved that he's not a feminist. Asked directly, "Are you a feminist?" in an interview for a woman's magazine, Mr Cameron reportedly stared out the window for, quote, rather a long time, close quote, before saying, I don't know what I'd call myself. It's up to others to attach labels. But I believe that men and women should be treated equally. Cameron's interview has reinforced what the UK media calls the Tories, in quotes, problem with women. New Zealand has just celebrated the 120th anniversary of women winning the vote. Associate Professor Kate Pickles from the University of Canterbury has celebrated the Māori woman involved in that campaign through an article in the Christchurch Press. 113 ministers attending the United Nations General Assembly's annual debate have signed a declaration of commitment to end sexual violence and conflict. The declaration contains a set of practical and political commitments designed to end the use of rape and sexual violence as a weapon in conflicts. The document also prohibits amnesties for sexual violence in peace agreements. WomenPower aims to promote action to resolve the barriers women still face. Each week we'll have 5 key action points. Here are this week's action points.
Rapu i ngā wahine e tū ana mō ngā kōwhiringa pōti ā-rohe ki te tuku tautoko kia rātou.
Make contact with the Māori women who have put their hands up for local elections in your area and ask how you can support their campaigns.
Me tuku tautoko ki ngā wahine kaiarahi o ia hāpuri me o rātou hinanga rawe. Mena he tangata rongonui koe, kōrerotia tō rātou reka i ngā wā katoa.
Support the positive work that is already happening in your communities that is being led by Māori women, and tell the story of these initiatives at every opportunity you can, especially if you have a public profile.
Mō ngā wahine kua noho kē ki te ao tō rangapū, ho atu te kōrero aki kia rātou.
Give your support to Māori women who are already putting their voices forward in the political arena by making contact with them and encouraging them.
Me aki ki ngā wahine rangatira o ia hāpuri ki te tū mō ngā kōwhiringa pōti nui o 2014.
Encourage Māori women leaders from your community to think about standing for the 2014 general elections.
Mahia te mahi ki te patua ngā wero mō ngā wahine ki te tū i ngā wā katoa.
Continue to develop your own critical thinking on why Māori women's voices are not sufficiently represented, and constantly challenge those barriers in everything you do. That's our program for this week. Join me next week when we'll talk about being a feminist mum to both girls and boys. We'll also discuss rape law reform and how women can get justice from the legal system. If you want to debate this program and action to improve the position of women, go to our WomenPower Facebook page. Thanks for watching. Ka kite anō.